Hi there, and welcome to the 4Ps episode 145. I'm your friend Matt. And I'll be honest, I've been a little wary of the stock market lately, despite the long-term growth and positive gains in the latest bull market. I think a correction, though, is definitely coming. Probably not going to be the collapse or the crash that some are predicting. Yes, certain industries are in their own micro bubbles, while others continue to grow, like green energy and electric cars. Some continue to evolve, like digital media, connected TV, OTT video, and others are probably going to return, like travel and retail. My personal investment philosophy has always been to invest a little bit at a time in the companies that I believe in, right? The ones that I support and align with and maybe even use every day, and then see what happens. The 4Ps. Professional. Political. But like everything, diversification is key, which is why I'm still riding Bitcoin long term, still got my retirement funds, and now I've been getting into NFTs. But more on that just in a little bit. This is something practical. And my sister used to tell me that you can't bullshit a bullshitter. And as a kid, I had a proclivity for storytelling that often extended beyond the line of exaggeration, I'll admit it. And looking back on it now, some of it may have been driven by the need for attention or positive feedback, but I also think there was a playfulness to it, almost like seeing what I could get away with. And as I grew older, I realized how important the truth really is. Relationships are rooted in trust, whether it's a relationship between individuals or a relationship between individuals and organizations. And there is far more bullshit being fed to us on a daily basis, from the news, from elected officials at work, from advertisers, from our kids now, even. Even if you're aware that so much of the information to which we're exposed stretches or abandons the truth, it can still be hard to know what to do about it. We all need to be alert to the dangers of bullshit, right? Anti-vaxxers saying that vaccines cause autism. Trump winning the election. I didn't eat the last pretzels. All bullshit. Bullshit has been a problem since the beginning of civilization. Plato accused rival philosophers, and yes, that was a thing, but he accused them that they were interested in only winning arguments, not in what was actually true. Now we have hyper-partisan news networks, social media algorithms, and uninformed everyday citizens who are more susceptible to manipulations. We have people who are determined to impress or persuade others. People who care more about winning the argument than whether they're telling the truth. Whereas a lie can simply be something that isn't true. What I'm talking about is actually more designed to look as much like the truth as possible without really caring about or providing evidence. One of my wife's favorite scientific expressions when trying to battle the bullshit is that correlation does not imply causation. Even though data or studies may show a correlation, it doesn't tell us anything about why these two things might be linked. Data can also be twisted or used to say anything you want, really, including the implication of cause and effect, meaning that people can spew bullshit with numbers, even without resorting to outright lies. Now, in my line of work, digital marketing, the increased ease or accessibility of data used to create better marketing strategies and advertising has become a cliche. It's a talking point at conferences and in presentations. But big data, statistics, and infographics can all be replete with bullshit as well. The other problem that technology, machine learning, algorithms, AI, all that stuff present us with is that research isn't always built on sturdy foundations. A longtime mentor of mine used to talk about why she loved hiring former journalists. As a former journalist myself, this made me feel validated. But journalists are trained to ask questions and think critically. Who's behind the information? How do they get it? What agenda are they trying to push? Journalists, most of them at least, develop and hone and trust their bullshit radar. If something sounds or feels too good to be true, probably is. Calling people out for promulgating inaccurate information is important. But doing this effectively requires having accurate facts and data, figures, stats, links, or citations to share from reputable sources. And if you make a mistake, admit it. Otherwise, you've just become another bullshitter yourself. Something personal. And within the last few months, a revolution in sports, technology, the collectibles market, cryptocurrency, this convergence has taken at least a small part of the digital world by storm. It's called NBA Top Shot. It is an online marketplace and a blockchain-based platform that enables fans to own unique NBA highlights, player clips known as moments. A moment is an NBA highlight that's become a digital collectible and can be bought, sold, traded, gifted, held onto in your portfolio. Over time, the value has appreciated, even in a very quick amount of time. I'm becoming obsessed. I've only been on the platform for about 6 weeks, but it comes up in conversations, even work-related meetings and calls almost now, if not more, than Clubhouse. It was built on an innovation called NFT, non-fungible tokens. And an NFT becomes a unique identifier tied to specific assets that gives the individual, the owner, authenticity and proof of the ownership of that asset. And for NBA Top Shot, this is that player clip. It's the highlight, and it's created and minted in limited releases and series and sold in packs and then traded and sold for higher value. If you've ever collected baseball cards or memorabilia, autographs, this is something that I think you might be interested in. The scarcity and the provenance, the meaning of the moments that these individual assets create determines the value, and then each moment has its own clearly identified set or series or tier that it's tied to, as well as a serial number, which tracks when it's bought and sold. It can sound intimidating or nerdy or just something not worth looking into, but the value is real, and I've already collected and flipped value that has created sort of a 10x ROI just so far. And if you get involved now, you'll still be in very early. Early adopters will make the money in this and have an opportunity to buy and collect moments that will explode. In addition to buying individual moments, the site also drops new packs on a somewhat regular basis, and this is where the value is ultimately derived. Right, last week I was able to buy one of 45,000 packs containing 5 Series 2 moments. The entire pack was worth $14. Over 250,000 people tried to get a pack. It's just randomized. I've already sold 3 of the 5 moments for significantly more money and used that to buy others that have appreciated over time. The only caveat to all of this is that the platform is still so new and glitchy. It crashes. It crashed several times before even the last pack drop. But the customer service, the social community, and just the fun around the chat functionality and the speculation is making it worthwhile. So the best advice I can give you is just to read as much as possible before buying anything. Check out the community on the Discord chat network. And like any investment, don't spend more than you're willing to lose in case this whole thing crashes to zero, which I hope it doesn't. In the meantime, have fun and keep shooting. As something political, and this month, in upholding my personal pledge to read only Black authors during Black History Month, I finally got around to spending time and reading the late John Lewis's book called Across That Bridge. This is the last week of Black History Month, the first Black History Month since Lewis's passing last year. And while I was not intending to talk about the book really in this space, I've been unable to think about much else in the past few days. It was written back in 2017, and the book is filled with both hope and progress, but it also shows how much remains in the ongoing pursuit of progress. It also shows that lasting change in the past and the present of the American Civil Rights Movement, fighting and challenging injustice, requires all of our involvement. Unless you've lived under a rock for the past few decades, you likely know some of Lewis's personal story. He was born into a family of sharecroppers in the Jim Crow South, but he's perhaps best known for peacefully leading activists across the Edmund Pettus Bridge in Selma, in Alabama. And he paid a price for it. He was beaten within an inch of his life. And he never wavered. He went on to serve the city of Atlanta in Congress for almost 30 years. But across that bridge is both a literal and a metaphorical telling of recent American history. Dozens of peaceful demonstrators were brutally beaten on that bridge in Selma. I think Lewis had a fractured skull, even, and he bore the scars for the rest of his life. But there have been tens of thousands of incidents of violence against black Americans in the years since. Yet Lewis and other civil rights leaders never gave up. They never abandoned their principles. That awful day set a precedent for meeting today's challenges. I can not even imagine what Lewis would have thought about the 2020 presidential election, with a record number of young minority voters ushering Biden and Harris into office. Would he see it as a mass awakening, or just another step in Americans' re-engagement with their responsibility within the democratic process? 2020 was a dark year for many reasons, but Lewis's stories are a reminder that dark times are really just a starting point for something better. I cannot and will not attempt to retell those stories and that meaning here, but I will share a few key lessons that I took from the reading. The first is that a fervent, unshakable faith in your convictions will render the opposition powerless. John Lewis's faith wasn't rooted necessarily in religion, although he was religious, but it was rooted more in something he believed to be true with every fiber of his being. His faith enabled him to stick to his convictions, again, never wavering in his belief in nonviolence or in his faith that we are one human family regardless of race. As John Lewis and his colleagues faced increased violence and hatred over the years, their faith only grew stronger. Another Lewis lesson: with activism, patience is a virtue. The struggle for voting rights in Selma and beyond demonstrates the power of patience as a powerful catalyst for change. The 15th Amendment gave African Americans the right to vote, but state and local groups prevented that from happening and becoming a reality for like 100 years. But the protests of the 1960s broke the dam of Southern resistance and led directly to the Voting Rights Act of 1965. Lewis and other civil rights leaders have taught us that we still have a ways to go. We cannot simply disconnect from the world around us. We can't ignore race and class divides or poverty or unemployment, access to food or homelessness, or even the healthcare crisis. But we need to act, we need to organize, and we need to inspire each other. And we need to remain nonviolent. John Lewis believed that peace and love are more powerful than any destructive weapon, right? He was a warrior for peace. Our purpose in life, he believed, was to fully express gifts so that others might see their own potential to shine. Right? From the Occupy movement or the Arab Spring and even Black Lives Matter within the last few years, many of us are fighting the same battles. They're fighting the same battles that he fought, that Dr. Martin Luther King fought during the Civil Rights Movement. And John Lewis knew that with inaction, the darkness only grows stronger. So I pledge to do my small part, but let's commit to positive actions and let the light grow a bit brighter every day. And something professional. And while I am fascinated with the many different ways that companies and journalists and marketers each write out and spell the word e-commerce, right? Capital E hyphen whatever. I'm even more enamored with the accelerated growth of the e-commerce market overall. People like to think of e-commerce as an industry, but I think of it more as an ecosystem. That is, if we're using the 8th grade definition that I remember having to write and memorize on the flashcard from 8th grade science, right? An ecosystem is the interaction between the environment and living organisms. It's a community where the living and non-living components of the environment actually interact with each other. Now, over the past year, e-commerce has reached an all-time high. COVID lockdowns, travel bans, retail closures, they boosted online consumerism, and the data, no bullshit here, is staggering. E-commerce penetration rose from 15% to 25% in 2020. The average items per order, right, in the basket increased by 60% during COVID-19. 44% of consumers tried new brands during the pandemic. 43% of shoppers now feel more positive about shopping online. And almost 40% of consumers report they're more comfortable with the digital technology than ever before. They're just more trusting. With COVID vaccination deployment well underway, the light at the end of the needle is in sight. eMarketer now predicts that e-commerce growth may decelerate substantially worldwide this year, despite consumers' newfound enthusiasm for digital shopping and the different solutions. Also, many consumers were just underwhelmed by the disappointing e-commerce experiences that they had. Right? Not all companies have the infrastructure in place to deliver a world-class customer experience. Fulfillment issues create concern, right? There's mistrust there. Either way, the e-commerce consumer market has increased, but digital media dollars have not followed proportionally. Acquisition costs are going up. So how are brands actually going to boost loyalty and retain consumers? The answer, surprisingly or not, social media. Social media marketing is made up of different strategies and tactics. It provides platforms with the opportunity to humanize brands and utilizes the most sophisticated targeting technology in the history of advertising. And people increasingly trust the platforms for commerce more than they have. 40% of consumers have made a purchase via Facebook, 13 via Instagram, and 12 or 13 via Pinterest. But despite proclaimed discomfort and a lack of trust in social media platforms overall, online shoppers actually think that social media platforms benefit their purchasing decisions. Again, another 40% of retailers are using social media platforms to drive sales. Around 30% of interviewed participants in a survey done by eMarketer said that if they like a product, they would order it through social media platforms. Online retailers that have at least one active social media account make 32% more sales than online retailers that don't use social media platforms. And approximately 55% of Gen Z users said that their clothing purchases are influenced by posts that they saw on social media platforms. Influencers. So here we are. For brands, the key to e-commerce success requires an understanding of and an adaptation to the evolving consumer base. The best solution is an investment in an omni-channel social media content, media, and sales strategy. In other words, optimize each platform to best serve users and integrate all of your platforms into a single, seamless approach. So what are you buying these days? And more importantly, how?